Okay, this is part 47 of Nos4a2. Haverville. Every day after lunch, Sigmund D. Zote had an hour to himself to paint his tiny soldiers. It was his favorite hour of the day. He listened to the Berlin Orchestra performing the Frobisher Sextet, Cloud Atlas, and painted the Hun in their 19th century helmets and coats with tails and gas masks. He had a miniature landscape on a 6-foot by 6-foot sheet of plywood that was supposed to represent an acre of Verdun-sur-Meuse, an expanse of blood-soaked mud, burned trees, tangled shrubbery, barbed wire, and bodies. Sig was proud of his careful brushwork. He painted gold braid on epaulets, microscopic brass buttons on coats, spots of rust on helmets. He felt that when his little men were painted well, they possessed attention, a suggestion that they might at any moment begin to move on their own and charge the French line. He was working on them the day it finally happened, the day when they finally did begin to move. He was painting a wounded Hun, the little man grabbing at his chest, his mouth open in silent cry. Sig had a daub of red on the end of the brush, meant to put a splash of it around the German soldier's fingers, but when he reached out, the Hun backed away. Sigmund stared, studying the 1-inch soldier under the bright glare of the lamp on its articulated arm. He reached with the tip of the brush again, and the soldier swayed away. Sig tried a third time. "Hold still, you little bastard," he thought, and missed entirely. Not even close. A painted crimson splash across the metal lampshade instead. And it wasn't just the one soldier moving anymore. It was all of them. They lurched toward one another, wavering like candle flames. Sigmund rubbed his hand across his forehead, felt a hot and slimy sweat there. He inhaled deeply and smelled gingerbread cookies. A stroke, he thought. I am having a stroke. Only he thought it in Dutch because for the moment English eluded him. And never mind, he had spoken English as his first language since he was 5. He reached for the edge of the table to push himself to his feet and missed and fell. Sig hit the walnut floor on his right side and felt something snap in his hip. It broke like a dry stick under a German jackboot. The whole house shook with the force of his fall, and he thought, still in Dutch, "That will bring Gazelle." "Hope," he called. "Ik hem in slag neer." That didn't sound right, but he needed a moment to figure out why. Dutch. She wouldn't understand Dutch. "Gazelle, I have fallen down." She didn't come, didn't respond in any way. He tried to think what she could be doing that she wouldn't hear him, then wondered if she was outside with the air-conditioning repairman. The repairman, a dumpy little man named Bing something, had turned up in grease-stained overalls to replace a condenser coil as part of a factory recall. Sig's head seemed a bit clearer down here on the floor. When he had been up on the stool, the air had started to seem soupy and low, overheated and faintly cloying, what with that sudden smell of gingerbread. Down here, though, it was cooler, and the world seemed inclined to behave. He saw a screwdriver he had been missing for months nestled among some dust bunnies under the work table. His hip was broken. He was sure of that, could feel the fracture in it, like a hot wire embedded under the skin. He thought if he could get up, though, he could use his stool as a makeshift walker to get across the room to the door and out into the hall. Perhaps he could reach the door and shout for the air-conditioning man, or to Vic McQueen across the street. Except no. Vicky was off in New Hampshire somewhere with that boy of hers. No, if he could get as far as the phone in the kitchen, he would just have to call emergency services and hope Gazelle found him before the ambulance pulled into the driveway. He didn't want to shock her more than was necessary. Sig reached up with one gangly arm, got the stool, and struggled to his feet, keeping his weight off the left leg. It hurt anyway. He heard bone click. "Gazelle," he screamed again, his voice a throaty roar. "God damn, Gazelle." He leaned over the stool, both hands on its edge, and took a long, trembling breath, and smelled the Christmassy odor of gingerbread again. He almost flinched. The fragrance was so strong and clear. A stroke, he thought again. This was what happened when you were stroking out. The brain misfired, and you smelled things that weren't there, while the world drooped around you, melting like dirty snow in a warm spring rain. He turned himself to face the door, which was not 12 paces away. The door to his studio hung wide open. He could not imagine how Gazelle would fail to hear him shouting if she was anywhere in the house. She was either outside by the noisy air conditioner or shopping or dead. He considered this array of possibilities again, outside by the noisy air conditioner, shopping or dead, and was disquieted to find the third possibility not quite preposterous. He lifted the stool an inch off the floor, moved it forward, set it down, hobbled forward with it. Now that he was standing, the inside of his head was going light again, his thoughts drifting like goose feathers on a warm breeze. A song was running around and around in his head, stuck in an idiot loop. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. Perhaps she'll die. Only the song grew in volume, building and building until it no longer seemed to be inside his head, but in the air around him, coming down the hall. There was an old lady who swallowed a spider that wriggled and jiggled and tickled inside her, sang the voice. It was high-pitched, off-key, and curiously hollow, like a voice heard at a distance through a ventilation shaft. Sig glanced up and saw a man in a gas mask moving past the open door. The man in the gas mask had Gazelle by the hair and was dragging her down the hall. Gazelle didn't seem to mind. She wore a neat blue linen dress and matching blue heels, but as she was hauled along, one of the shoes pulled loose and fell off her foot. The gas mask man had her long chestnut hair streaked with white wrapped around one fist. Her eyes were closed, her narrow gaunt face serene. The gas mask man turned his head, looked in at him. Sig had never seen anything so awful. It was like in that movie with Vincent Price where the scientist crossed himself with an insect. His head was a rubber bulb with shining lenses for eyes and a grotesque valve for a mouth. Something was wrong in Sig's brain, something maybe worse than a stroke. Could a stroke make you hallucinate? One of his painted Huns had strolled right off his model of Verdun and into his back hallway, was abducting his wife. Maybe that was why Sig was struggling to stay upright. The Hun were invading Haverhill and had bombed the street with mustard gas. Although it didn't smell like mustard, it smelled like cookies. The gas mask man held up a finger to indicate he would be back shortly, then continued down the hallway, towing Gazelle by the hair. He began to sing again. There was an old lady, the gas mask man sang, who swallowed a goat, just opened her throat and swallowed a goat. What a greedy bitch. Sig slumped over the stool. He couldn't feel his legs. He reached to wipe the sweat out of his face and poked himself in the eye. Boots clomped across the workshop floor. It took an effort of will for Sig to lift his head. It felt as if there were a great weight balanced on top of it, a 20-pound stack of iron. The gas mask man stood over the model of Verdun, looking down at the cratered ruin, stitched with barbed wire, his hands on his hips. Sig recognized the man's clothes at last. He wore the oil-stained jumpsuit of the air conditioner repairman. Little men, the gas mask man said. I love little men. Up the airy mountain, down the rushy glen. We daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. He looked at Sig and said, Mr. Mannix says I'm a rhyming demon. I say I'm just a poet and didn't know it. How old is your wife, mister? Sig had no intention of answering. He wanted to ask what the repairman had done with Gazelle, but instead he said, I married her in 1976. My wife is 59, 15 years younger than myself. You dog, you, robbing the cradle. No kids? No, I have ants in my brain. That's the sevoflurane, the gas mask man said. I pumped it in for your air conditioner. I can tell that your wife never had kids, those hard little tits. I gave them a squeeze and I can tell you, women who have had babies don't have tits like that. Why are you doing this? Why are you here? Sig asked. You live across the street from Vic McQueen, and you have a 2-car garage, but only 1 car, the gas mask man told him. When Mr. Mannix comes back around the corner, he'll have a place to park. The wheels on the Wraith go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the Wraith go round and round all day long. Sig Dizot became aware of a series of sounds, a hiss, a scratch, and a thump, repeating over and over. He couldn't tell where they were coming from. The noise seemed to be inside his head, in the same way that the gas mask man's song had seemed to be inside his head for a while. That hiss, scratch, and thump was what he had now in place of thoughts. The gas mask man looked down at him. Now, Victoria McQueen looks like she has a real set of mommy tits. You've seen them firsthand. What do you think of her tits? Sig stared up at him. He understood what the gas mask man was asking, but could not think how to reply to such a question. Vic McQueen was just 8 years old. In Sig's mind, she had become a child again, a child with a boy's bicycle. She came over now and then to paint figurines. It was a pleasure to watch her work, painting little men with quiet devotion, eyes narrowed as if she were squinting down a long tunnel, trying to see what was at the other end. That is her place across the street, isn't it? The gas mask man said. Sig intended not to tell him, not to collaborate. Collaborate was the word that came to his mind, not cooperate. Yes, he heard himself say. Then he said, Why did I tell you that? Why am I answering your questions? I am not a collaborator. That's the Silva Florine, too, the gas mask man said. You wouldn't believe some of the things people used to tell me after I gave them some of the sweet old gingerbread smoke. This one old grandma, like 64 years old at least, told me the only time she ever came was when she took it up the pooper. 64. Ugh, right? Will you still need me? Will you still ream me when I'm 64? He giggled the innocent, bubbling laughter of a child. It is a true serum, Sig said. It took a profound effort to verbalize this question. Each word was a bucket of water that had to be laboriously drawn up from a deep well by hand. Not exactly, but it sure relaxes your intuitions, opens you up to suggestion. You wait till your wife starts to come around. She'll be gobbling my cock just like it's lunch and she missed breakfast. She'll just think it's the thing to do. Don't worry, I won't make you watch. You'll be dead by then. Listen, where is Vic McQueen? I've been watching the house all day. It doesn't look like there's anyone home. She isn't away for the summer, is she? That'd be a pain. That'd be a pain in the brain. But Sigmund de Zoet didn't answer. He was distracted. It had come to him, finally, what he was hearing, what was producing that hiss, that scratch, that thump. It wasn't inside his head at all. It was the record he had been listening to. The Berlin Orchestra playing the Cloud Atlas Sextet. The music was over.